welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. Oh my God, Tim, you're electric.
I am Tym Moss.
And he's electric today.
And you are?
Who am I today? I'm electric even though I'm not flashing. You know Tim likes to flash.
I'm Tym Moss. This is Wendy Stuart, and welcome to If These Walls Could Talk.
Oh my God, you got it all out. And I have to say you are color coordinated too. The green in your glasses.
Yes, this is what I wore in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I'll get to that in a second. And this is what I got at the Broadway. And this is what I got at the Theater World Awards.
Right. Yeah. And can you tell people a little bit about the Theater World Awards, which Tim invited me to? I had a blast.
Yes, I will get into that. And I see what you mean about this, like trying to turn this off. Oh my God.
You can't turn them off. And I swear to God, I thought I was going to end up having a seizure from those things flashing in my eyes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I had quite a week, but yeah, Wendy and I went to the Theater World Awards the other night, which was absolutely wonderful.
Impressive.
It kind of celebrates the Broadway community, the off-Broadway community. There were just all kinds of celebrities. Kristen Chenoweth was there. Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City had made a speech. They're just all kinds of Well,
we had, Sarah Pitchin from Stereophonic. I've got tickets for that. I'm seeing that in July. For me, Tim, this was my very first time going to that. And I have to tell you, it's been around forever and a day. And I separates that from the other award shows. Both the presenters and the people accepting the speeches, they weren't like the normal, like, I want to thank, my parents or whatever. Each and every person hit upon an emotional chord if they were presenting or if they were accepting. And it was incredibly human. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it really was. And very heartfelt, very heartfelt.
And heartfelt.
Yeah, but I was at the after party, I got a picture with Casey Likes, who I absolutely adore. Ooh. He plays Marty McFly in Back to the Future.
That's the person, right?
He's just the sweetest thing. I mean, just everybody was there. It was just such a wonderful mixture of people.
Fun.
And I love shows and parties like that.
I love shows like that. I love parties like that. I almost got trampled though trying to get the egg roll or the fried mozzarella stick. They were out of control. They were
serious about that.
They were serious. You had a lot of hungry people. I'm like, I'm gonna get injured here. Oh my God.
Speaking of hungry people, last week I've got to get my phone out to get I did so much last week. Last week for UBC TV, I covered the Cannabis Expo.
Oh my God, that's fun.
at the Javits Center. And I learned so much about the cannabis industry. It's a new industry that's forming and growing and taking shape. And I had a ball just talking to all the different people at the different stages, because you've got your growers, and then you've got your manufacturers, and then you've got your distributors, and then you've got the people who own the stores, and it's just really quite an industry.
Now, was anybody letting people sample things?
Oh yeah, I got a bag. I got a bag of samples for a friend of mine.
Oh, did you really?
She smokes, so I'm like, get loaded up.
And did they have the CBC jellies? Did they have those?
Yeah, they had gels, they had the salve, they had lip balm.
Lip balm. Oh my God.
The oils, they had the weed itself, they had and all kinds of machines. They had this rolling machine that was really fascinating, but it was really cool. So you keep an eye out for that on UBC TV. Then on Friday, I went to Icavelli's and I cooked up a storm for his mother and his sister and him, and loved it. I made an Italian dish for Italians.
They were Italians.
And then we left from there to go to Philadelphia, because we performed in Upper Darby Pride, which was absolutely amazing. And Jess Brannis, our dear friend, she was the first lesbian to be appointed to or elected to the city council there. And I met the mayor and the city council, and U.S. senator was there, and a state senator. And it was
senators.
Really
there were senators. There were various senators that were there.
Yes. And then I come back to New York Saturday night, and on Sunday I get up early to go participate in the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which is where I wore this. And AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was on our float.
Right.
And she rode, I walked, and oh my God, was I feeling it? Oh my God.
Now I have a question for you because Coqui Chulo was who invited us. He invited both of us to go. I couldn't go, and I'll tell you what I was doing. But how did Chulo do there? Were they wearing the Chulo brand?
No, we didn't. It wasn't really Chulo. It was Ricardo was the one that was organizing.
So because Ricardo organized it, and his stuff is so fabulous and sexy.
Oh, I do. I love his Chulo underwear. But no, there wasn't any of the models or anything. This was more authentic Puerto Rican.
It was authentic, right?
Like some of the the dancers. And
historical, really cool. Right?
Cool. It was very cool, very cool. And then Monday night, after I recovered from the Puerto Rican Day Parade, then you and I went to the Broadway World Awards. So
right.
Well, that was kind of my week. How was your week?
Enough about your week. How about mine? Thursday night, I was at the amazing 40th birthday party of documentary filmmaker Steven Stewart, who happened to he's knee deep in films all the time. He did do one about elephants, and that's how we met. Because 20 years before he made his elephant film, I made an elephant film, a short, at Elephant Stay in Arataya, Thailand. I run into this guy at the Explorers Club. I'm talking to him and I tell him who I am and everything. He pulls up my name on his phone as to somebody that he was supposed to meet.
Oh my God.
Right. And I did my film 20 years earlier. Can you imagine? Anyway, he gave a fabulous 40th birthday party at a loft called Gary's Loft, and it's rentable. You can get this for a party. It's on 36th Street. It had a rooftop to die for.
Oh my God.
Empire State Building. The only thing was, it was kind of funny. I only knew like 2 people there because every single person that was there was from Burning Man. Tim, we went to Burning Man. We have never done that. And every single person at this thing, all these amazing creative people, had not only been to Burning Man once or twice or 3 times. I was talking to people that were like, oh yeah, I've been going for the last 12 years. I'm like, I have not even, we have to do this, Tim.
Absolutely. I've been wanting to do that forever.
Me too. So I'll keep you posted on that. Now this, Saturday, I hope you'll all join me. I'll be performing in the Garden for the Pride in the Garden Fest on 6th Street between B and C. I'll be doing as many parodies as I can get in 5 minutes. Certainly my new one, Don't Say Gay. Got to do that one. Perfect for Pride. And then Thursday night, all of us get together at Julius Bar, the oldest gay bar in the Village. So with it being Pride Week, please, if you're around, we'll be there from 6 o'clock on. I will be leaving there to go celebrate my friend Satanya Face, who's also known as Alex Kelso. And his show is called The Unicorn Who Wanted to Be a Boy. Am I close? Is that the title?
It's something
like that. But it's at Green Room 42 at 9:30 Thursday night. So you have a chance to definitely catch him there. And then on Saturday night, we had the amazing Jeffrey Vouse on our show. And we are going to go see he's on a 2-week run at the Chain Theater. The show is called Tomorrow We Love. Can't wait to see him.
We'll be seeing that.
312 West 36. And Saturday, they're calling their opening night, even though it opens on Thursday. Monday night, come see all of us out in Brooklyn. We will be screening at Lucky 13. There's a horror fest, and Drag to Death is one of the films. So you can catch everybody there. And I don't want to forget, this weekend, I did one of my favorite events to produce and be in. It's called the Phoenix Fashion Show. It is a vintage fashion show. I do it in Pennsylvania. It is very homegrown, and now it's become huge. And the clothing's amazing. And this is a perfect lead-in for our guests, too.
Well, hold on.
Yes, I'm not done yet. Men wear women's clothes. Women wear men's clothes, or you can just do one gender on top and a different one on the bottom. And I call it my gender bender fashion show.
I just want to say, I'm also, after this, I have to run over to a ballroom at the High Bridge here, and then to a filmmakers meetup. And then tomorrow night, I'm at, if anybody's going, I will see you at Gracie Mansion for the mayor's Pride reception.
You have the mayor's thing tomorrow night. That's really
and
important.
then I'm going to see Patriots on Friday and Saturday, you and I are going to see Jeffrey and Steven's show.
We are indeed. We're broadcasting here today from Pangea. Yes. So I want to tell everybody on June 21st, the amazing David Mills. It's a Thursday night. If you haven't caught David's show here, you must see David Mills. Penny Arcade will be making a cameo in that show. She's the special guest. It's a comedy cabaret. Firebrand David Mills. He's putting together a new show and he's trying out new material. So he's calling it a work in progress. Okay. You get to hear his jokes and songs before they're polished up for the fall. My gosh, that sounds just amazing. Woo! That was
now.
And now, and now, you know, we gave you the potatoes. Now we're getting to the meat. Okay. I first got to meet our guest at the LGBTQ Center on 13th Street in New York. She was doing a reading of her fabulous book. And I was so impressed with this person. Before I give away the name of her book, I have to tell you that it is more than the dazzle of drag, the lip sync, the impersonators, and the fabulous costumes. What she shows is how drag has played a vital role in history and an incredible role in the creative nightlife of New York. The book was called The Urban History on Glitter and Fire, and I'm quoting other people, so that's why I'm twisting my words around. However, the book is called Glitter and Concrete, and the amazing author is Elyssa Maxx Goodman, and we are thrilled to have her here today. It was a mouthful.
There we go. How are you, Elyssa?
I'm well. How are you, Tim? Thank you both so much for having me.
I'm so happy. I'm like so happy when you said you were available because I loved your reading.
Thank you.
You know, you have paid homage to drag in a way that it needs to be, you know, taken seriously. And you know, a lot of people do not know the history of drag.
Well, a lot of people see RuPaul's Drag Race and think, oh, drag, that's new.
Right. Right. No, that's exactly right. But
no, it's been going on back to Shakespeare. Right. The men had to dress up as women to perform the plays.
Well, like since the late 1865.
Well, my book goes from 1865
Your
to
book
the
does,
present,
right.
But drag is thousands of years.
Thousands of years. Right. Thousands of years old.
I mean, it goes back even further than, I mean, the times of Kabuki. It goes back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome.
It's international too, the international roots of drag. So the night I saw you sitting, I didn't see your picture or anything before I had come to the center. And there you are. And I'm like, how does she know all this? She's young. No, Tim, it's like, right. It's like we know this stuff because we've been decades in New York and have gone through like from Lip Synca and way back Ruby Rims from way back. And then there you are. And I'm like, oh my God, this girl's really done her homework. How did this all start for you?
How did the book start, or how did my
your interest in drag, yeah.
Sure. That starts with Tuong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And I saw it when I was about 7 years old.
Can you believe it? I can't believe it.
So drag has been a part of my life for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And the book happened. I was, you know, when you're a writer, you always think about maybe doing a book and what that might look like, but I didn't want to be a person who wrote a memoir at 26, you know.
That's very funny. I know exactly right.
And then in November 2017, as I'm sure you both know, Flawless Serena passed away.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that her story didn't get lost, but also the stories of anyone else who was like her. And I think for the first time, I had started playing with the idea, and I said something about it out loud for the first time in December 2017. And I sort of played with it a little bit. And then I spoke to a colleague who works in queer media, and I said to them, you know, I have this idea. And they said, absolutely, you must do that. And that was March of 2018. and I started working on it that night. So from the night I started working on it to the day the book came out was 5.5 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And the amount of research. Oh my
Tim,
God.
really, it's first of all, let's start with Flawless Sabrina. We of course knew who Flawless Sabrina was.
Yeah.
I got a lot of friends of all different ages, including mine, who have no idea.
Yes.
In the gay community, or in any community, who Flawless Sabrina was. I love that you know, were so affected by her passing, because you're right, it represented the loss of that culture. And to me, like, what's your responsibility as a writer? You can do this, you can get the story out, and you can take it on and share it.
I mean, it was interesting. People have asked me, like, why even do this? You know,
why even do this, right?
And it just sort of felt what I've compared it to in the past is, it felt like brushing my teeth. Like I knew it had to get done.
Yeah, it was organic.
And you know, if not, society would collapse, or, you know, my teeth would fall out. It would be the whole thing. And I just knew, I think there was a moment when I realized that I had the skill set to do it, and then I started to feel more confident that it was something that I
attainable,
not just could do, but then needed to do. In the moments when I realized that I had the skill sets to do it, it's just like, if you think this is something you can do, you must do it.
I'm curious about that particular. I just want to ask her about the skill set for a sec that started this. Talk about your skill set, because you're right. If your book is the way it's put together and everything, I'm like, you were either in like the most amazing MFA program on the face of the earth, or you had a lot of that to begin with. Can you elaborate on that for Tim and I?
Oh, sure. I don't have an MFA, but I've been writing. I've been getting paid to write since I'm 15 years old. So I've been doing this for 20 years.
You're like a prodigy. She's a prodigy, Tim.
But my bread and butter is that I'm an arts and culture journalist, and I started writing about history for magazines. So my relationship, and I always had a longstanding passion for history, for learning about the past, and specifically in cultural realms. So I have done a lot of that kind of work, and you know, I've written in my time. I've written for Vogue, T, the New York Times Style magazine, Vanity Fair, Elle, all these different kinds of places. And the places where I had started writing about history translated into wanting to write about drag. And then I had the idea for the book. I think I had even gotten the book deal, and I pitched a column to Condé Nast's Them, where I was writing about drag history. And so it was just sort of, became an extension of my working life. But I've been writing about drag professionally for almost 13 years, probably about 12 and a half years.
That is so incredible to me, you know. And you're writing about it, and you write about it in depth, and you write about it beautifully.
Thank you.
And you shine a light on the drag community, which, as you know, like the LGBTQ community, anything on the spectrum is under attack right now.
Yes.
So you came out with this beautiful pink, I love that it's pink, positive book.
Thank you.
You know, paying homage to drag. When you were this 7-year-old and you saw that film, how were your parents affected by having, you know, lots of little girls, and now I'm stereotyping, they like unicorns and the color pink and all of that, but rarely, and they like now Drag Story Hour, but you were a whole other thing. How did you?
My parents had like their sort of own long like alternative culture living. They didn't become parents until they were 42. My mom was at Woodstock. My dad,
your mom was at Woodstock,
lived on a commune. Like, they had these lives where they understood that there was something else outside of
brilliant,
you know, 4 walls in the suburbs, you know.
And you grew up in the suburbs.
I did, yeah. But my parents were native New Yorkers.
They
were from, my mom was from Forest Hills and my dad was from the Bronx.
Your dad was from the Bronx, so am I.
Oh, okay.
Your parents are probably the same age as me too. Wow, that's funny.
And so my mother, both of them have a long relationship with dressing and design. And my mother was an interior designer for many years. And one of the people that she worked with was a muralist named Frank Hill. And Frank was an Anne Margaret impersonator. And Frank was a person who taught her how to do her makeup. So, blending in the crease and highlighting under the brow bone and all these things like that. So she would spend time with Frank. And at one point, probably multiple points, was spending time, they were hanging out at someone's home, and she documented it on, she took pictures. She was a photographer as well. And one of the people that she photographed was a drag artist named Mahogany. And I remember this picture from when I was growing up. She had it enlarged. And I only just recently found the whole roll of film where it's like this entire hang. It's Frank's murals. There's this gorgeous mural of Anne Margaret.
Right? And you remember,
right?
Yeah. And then actually, I had never seen Frank in drag until I was going through my mother's things a couple months ago. And there was an ad from this magazine called David, which was a gay magazine in Fort Lauderdale.
I actually know of it because I lived in Fort Lauderdale. This is an amazing story.
And so there was an ad on one of these pages that had been ripped out of David magazine, 83, 84, of Frank Hill as Anne Margaret.
Wow.
And it was the first time I had seen him in drag. So it felt really special to be reconnecting with my own relationship to drag and drag history.
Well, it came full circle. Finding that.
But they were really encouraging always of my interest in drag. My dad, at one point found a documentary on the imperial court system in Washington, D.C. that he wanted to watch.
I'm a member of the imperial court in New York.
Yeah.
I love it.
And
wow.
So they just knew it was something that I loved, and they knew I loved beautiful costumes because they did too. And it just sort of grew from there.
You were blessed to have, their influence. Okay. And they took who their daughter was seriously. But now that you describe who your parents are, I totally get it.
Well, they also took me to my first drag show.
Okay, I took my daughter to her first gay pride at 2 years old, which started with Dykes on Bikes. I remember her screaming in the stroller as they revved their motorcycles. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, and she said, "Scary, scary." That was her first impression.
Now, you kind of skimmed by some very impressive magazines that you had written by. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So and they were all fashion, is that right?
The ones I mentioned were, but there are others too.
Yeah. Yeah, but those, that's a huge accomplishment to be. You were a contributing writer.
No, I've written like a couple of articles here and there.
Yeah.
Elle published also an excerpt of my book when it came out.
Wow.
And you're very accomplished at a young age as a writer. Tim is certainly great friends with Michael Musto. We all love Michael Musto.
Yeah, Michael blurbed my book.
Right. I read Michael's quote and everything, but Michael had years, right? From the time of the Village Voice. You started at 15 years of age. That's really quite incredible. And look at the publications that you work for.
Oh, yeah, it's exciting.
It is exciting.
So can you tell us a few of these magazines?
Sure. So the ones I mentioned, and then I've written with some frequency for them, for Inside Hook, for Hyperallergic. And then as far as, there are others, Playboy, Cosmopolitan.
These are huge.
Marie Claire,
those are all the biggies.
Yeah.
And then I've been starting to present the book in lots of different kinds of places too. So I was just on CNN on the whole story with Anderson Cooper talking about drag history. But then also at La Mama talking about drag history. I do a show with Glitter and Concrete called The Glitter and Concrete Show, and my business partner Jupiter, a drag artist. And so we've done that show at the Center for Brooklyn History.
I'm loving that you have a show. See, that you briefly mentioned it at your reading, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that and when you're going to do the show again? This is great.
Sure.
You've got a show connected to the book.
So it's called The Glitter and Concrete Show. And the premise of it is that I hire 3 drag artists to interpret a section of the book as an original performance. So then I introduce the book, I read a little bit from the intro, and then I introduce the artist and I read the section that they chose. And then they perform. And so then that happens 3 times.
I love
and then
this.
we do a conversation about drag at the end. So it's very artist driven. And then the artists at the end get to talk about the work that they're presenting and why they chose it.
What do you find, how knowledgeable do you find drag artists to be about the history of drag?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it depends from person to person. I think there are a lot of people who have learned drag history by word of mouth. And I know that there's a lot of people who are interested in learning more. But I don't know. I think it depends from person to person.
Have you noticed because you interviewed just about everybody, from the newer drag queens, the younger and newer, to the people that have been around for decades. What have you noticed in terms of the caring about the history of drag?
What I think is interesting is that it's less about the caring of it, and it's more, I think there are just some people who don't understand that they are a part of history.
That's exactly right.
And I think for a long time, because drag was so maligned, even within the queer community, that a lot of people just thought, it's, it doesn't really matter, the stuff that I'm doing. And that happens with ballroom also.
Right.
And so the way I think history got passed down for a very long time was oral history, was from person to person. And this is how you learned about, there's a story in the book about Anoni learning from Hattie Hathaway.
Hattie was one of my friends.
Learning from Hattie Hathaway about Marsha P. Johnson. Like that was how you learned, and this was the 90s by that point. Right. So I don't know if it's about caring or not. I think it's about maybe no one ever told them that they mattered.
Right.
Right.
And I think that is definitely part of something that I encountered. I spoke to Bob the drag queen for the book, and one of the things she said was, this is just so wild because I don't know if I ever thought of myself that way, but of course Bob is a part of the fabric.
Absolutely.
And was before Drag Race,
Yes, absolutely. I knew Bob before he
so,
I knew or worked with most of the New York queens, the Manhattan queens. I had worked with most of them before they went on the show. So
so I think it was a lot about that, and that was honestly one of my goals for the book, was to make sure that people knew that their stories mattered and that their lives mattered, and were worthy of being recorded, because they're making that's so influential and beautiful,
right? And have been through the decades. Really.
Now, one thing I would like to get your opinion on,
sure,
going back to, like, say the 1800s or the turn of the century, around the early 1900s, you had like vaudeville. They had traveled around in person on stage live. And then that turned into burlesque, which eventually turned into movies and television, which then television went right into everyone's home. And drag, when television kind of was forming, or after it had become established, like say the 50s and 60s, for example, drag was kind of viewed more as a punchline, like Flip Wilson,
Milton Berle.
That where, oh my God, look, that man dressed up as a woman, how funny.
Right.
And where it kind of stayed, it was never really taken legitimately as an art form until more recently, like with RuPaul. So what are your, do you see it that way, that, or how do you feel drag kind of, I mean, in vaudeville and burlesque, I'm sure it was also considered comedy.
It depends on the time in which the drag is
The
being
time frame,
consumed,
yeah.
I would say. So there were times when drag, how do I say this?
Just say it,
It
honey.
was a beloved form of theater for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it was on what were called American variety stages,
Right.
which were the precursor to vaudeville.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was this beloved form of entertainment. And what kind of happens in cycles that we are, again, unfortunately seeing now is that whenever men in power feel threatened in some way, they're inciting a backlash against drag. But
good point.
So these performers, when they were popular, depending on the time frame, were considered great artists, and they were called, because the language of the time would have been a protean artist, and that's a person who changes clothes, and maybe that's related to gender in some way,
right?
And so there was the artist label being affixed to it in some way. And so that was for certain performers throughout history. So like you would have called Kitty Donner, who's in my book, who performed at the beginning of the 20th century. You would have called Kitty Donner also a protean artist in addition to a male impersonator. I'm trying to think of other times. There were other times in history when drag was associated with an art form, and a lot of that had to do with actually like the desire for the artist in some way, whether or not they were, to separate themselves from ideas of queerness. You get that also with Julian Eltinge, who was, in his off hours, said by his publicist to be like, he'll take anyone in a boxing match, and he was stabbed by a Marlin,
super masculine stuff.
Butch, and like this was.
But boy, as soon as that lipstick and eyeshadow went on,
I always say it, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
But it also made him seem like more of an artist to go from, Butch, Marlin survivor, Marlin stabbing survivor, to like this elegant lady of the stage. So there were times when it was used for that, and then you get into places like phases rather like probably like the beginning of the 1940s through the 1950s, and maybe a little bit after that. You have something like the Jewel Box Review, where they had to really lean into the hearkening back to Shakespeare and, mentioning Julian Eltinge, and everything was mentioned as an act of great artistry. And the way that drag was presented, and the line I usually use is from the producers, where they say gorgeous showgirls and gooey gowns, like things like that. And it had to be that way because drag was being performed mostly for straight audiences. And that was one of the ways that it survived.
Well, the 50s was a very, in the box kind of time. So for drag to survive, it had to do certain perimeters.
And it had to be billed as artistry. And separated from ideas of queerness.
Now, I was trying to research years ago. Somebody had offered me, they were thinking of writing a play and were interested in me portraying this person, and it was a drag queen, I think from the 50s, maybe starting early 40s, 50s, 60s. I think maybe somewhere in there. Yeah. But at one point was a well-known drag artist, I think out in LA. And was driving across the country. I'm from the Midwest, and I was thinking she got pulled over somewhere in the Midwest, possibly Indiana or so, and got put in jail. And she had her 2 dogs, and they put the dogs in at a vet, and the 2 dogs ended up dying. And she was they kept extending her. I don't remember if she died in jail or or but she ended up writing her story.
Yes.
And he got a hold of the handwritten
Yes.
account. Did you know who that was?
That would be Ray Bourbon.
That's it. Thank you. Oh my God.
Write that down, Tim. I knew she would know it.
Was the person
I was hoping you would. Thank you.
The person you were working with, was that Randy Riddle?
Yes, Randy.
There you go.
Thank you for reminding me of all of this, because I couldn't
Tim,
remember.
that is an incredible story, and that would make an amazing play.
Right. And I would love to have played. That would be a fascinating
Incredible
story.
role to play.
Now, did he die in jail, or did he just do the writing in jail and then was released? I don't remember. Well, if you can't remember, that's okay. But
I think she did great, Tim. Look what she did for you.
Did amazing.
Right? It was like unbelievable. You just lit that fire in his brain.
Because I would like to revive that. That's
yeah, but there you go. Write it down, because
I did. I just
what
did.
an amazing role to play.
I had worked with Randy. I was thinking of maybe putting Ray in the book, but Ray had traveled through New York, but wasn't. And had maybe lived here for short periods of time, but was more of a traveling artist. And ultimately, I mean, the book was over 500 pages at some points. So
right.
At some point, you got to edit who you're going to talk about and who you're not. I totally get that.
I had a question that I wanted to ask you the night you were talking, but our time was whatever it was that night. Drag queen is what we hear about all the time. Drag queen is the phrase that's on everybody's lips. Why did drag kings play a lesser role in history? What do you think?
I mean, it depends on the way that you look at history, I guess. I would say that if you ask the drag kings that are working now, are these
like Murray Hill?
Sure.
And
Like
what would they say?
Well, I think if you ask the drag kings that are working now, like, do these people play a lesser role in history? They would say no, because they existed.
Right.
And they were continuing to further this art form, and there was a time again where, like, throughout history, kings have been beloved at different times. And I would say that, maybe sometimes the stories that we know don't come up.
That's a very good point. Is what we know,
right?
But those stories are out there, is what you're saying.
They're out there, and I wouldn't ever want to say that they were lesser in some way, because their existence contributes to the drag that we have now,
and our awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just the gender bending, because when I was first coming out, back in like the 70s and the 80s, early 80s, I would go to like smaller clubs in different cities or different towns. And it was always because it was kind of underground. Like it was not talked about in society like we do now. And so it was always kind of a hidden community. And we were always glad to kind of be in like-minded surroundings. And I just remember it was mostly men, always like trying to look their best and trying to attract another man. And then you had like a group of lesbians sitting over at this table over here or over on one side. And then there was always like one or two, usually rather sad, drag queens. But they were always there, kind of in the background, until they did their show, because they always had to perform. Like in every club I ever went to, there wasn't that many drag queens in the bar, usually one or two, but they always had to put on a show. Mm-hmm. And that was always just part of our culture. That was just how it is. Oh, there's a drag queen, there's going to be a show tonight.
Tim, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I still feel it's very stuck in that. We go to a lot of clubs, a lot of bars. I give events. There'll always be the 2 or 3 performers that are drag queens, and the gay boys are all clustered together,
trying to get laid.
right, trying to get laid. It's not, that is to me, and this is again my observance, and I'm out there a lot. That's a dynamic that hasn't changed. What do you think it is? Do you think it's because the drag person is the performer and the performer is bigger?
But now,
right?
but the thing is, now when you walk into a gay club, they're always looking for the drag queen. Like, oh my God, a drag queen! Like they've never seen one. I mean,
I
walking
think
on the
that a
corner of
lot
the
of
next
that is
drag bar or next bar, there's going to be a ton of drag queens. But it that part has shifted to where they were kind of removed and kind of like the cousin of our community, and now they're kind of like the queens of our community, and it's interesting how that has changed over the past couple
I think
days.
that when you go out in New York, and I go to events, the gay guys are still all together and they love the drag shows and they applaud them. But I remember Sweetie telling me this, right?
Yeah.
And this was fact. And I knew a lot of other drag performers. It was very hard if you were a drag queen that worked all the time to get a relationship.
Yes.
In the last 2 years of
absolutely.
Sweetie's life, because he, passed very young, Sweetie met a wonderful guy. And this relationship was so precious because it was the only one he had.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think that's changing a lot.
Fingers crossed, right?
I think we just, especially among younger people, I think there's a changing
absolutely
of the spectrum of gender and what drag
I
means.
completely agree with you on that.
I think for a very long time, drag represented a stereotyping of queerness that a lot of people didn't want to be associated with. And
very true.
Yeah, she hit the nail on that. I think you hit the nail on the head with
and
that.
I think as that moves out of the culture, and it's not gone. I mean, like, you still have people saying to each other on the apps, like, no femmes or whatever.
Right.
But I think as it changes, as culture changes, that is something that changes too. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, where did you get to be so intelligent about?
I'm telling you, Tim.
You're like 20 something.
I think he's like channeling somebody because I couldn't. But I said, "There's no way this person could have this amount of knowledge." And
and the whole analytical thinking of society, and it's great. I love talking to you,
Ambassador. Which I'm wondering when you were doing these interviews. I'm sure so many of the people that you interviewed loved you, but did you get any pushback? Like, who is this person, and what makes them think that they can tell the story?
Yes, I think there were a couple people who were skeptical,
right?
And that maybe came out sometimes in the way that we were talking, and one of them, I think in particular, was, I think this interview could have been a lot longer, but it was just so clear to me that this person, like, maybe really did not want to be talking to me and didn't really trust me and things like that. But we spoke, and I got a lot of information from them, and then they were so excited when the book came out.
Go figure, right? Go figure.
They were putting it up on Facebook and everything, and telling people how much they loved it and that they should go buy it. And I was just like, you never know. It depends on the person. I think something that happened a lot that was really important to me, especially for people who had been interviewed a lot, and were taking the time to speak with me, especially since I got my book deal in March of 2020. There were people available to speak to me who maybe I wouldn't have been able to speak to otherwise.
No, it's true, right? Because the city shut down. Everyone was like a sitting duck.
So it was really important to me, to these people who had been interviewed so extensively, to make sure that I wasn't asking them things that they had been asked for the last 30, 40 years.
Right.
And so I really did a lot of research before these interviews because I wanted to know about things that they hadn't talked about. So for example, I interviewed John Cameron Mitchell for the book, and really dove into all of the questions that he had been asked about Hedwig. And I watched the documentary, and I was preparing because I wanted to know what was it like going to Don Hills in the middle of summer, drag, you know,
great,
totally kitted out in Hedwig drag? Like, what was that like? And what song did you, you know, and what songs were you inspired by? And I got information out of him that I hadn't read elsewhere anyway.
Good.
Talk about, but
you were able to get that by the way you phrased it, and you got it.
My hope is that it was obscure enough a question that even if he had gotten it before, that he appreciated that I did.
Yes, right, exactly.
Wait, were you sweating under all of that Hedwig garb? How was it?
Now, in your interviews, what was there one moment that really surprised you that you just oh my God, I wasn't expecting that?
An aha moment in all of my interviews?
Well, or a few of them.
Well, I think
this is your time.
One of the ones I mentioned actually that really resonated with me was what Bob the Drag Queen said earlier. I just like, it was so beyond me that Bob couldn't fathom being part of the history of drag in New York, like how, you know, because I think at a certain point you're just hustling, you're just trying to do the do, you know, and you don't think about making history. But you know, I think and then I think it was on the Las Culturistas podcast, Bowen Yang says to Bob, like, one of the great joys about being a gay man in New York was going to see your show at Barracuda, you know, and it's just like, that is a historical moment,
right?
You know,
absolutely.
And I think sometimes people make history when they're not even thinking about it. You know, one of my other favorite things that I learned about when I was doing interviews was I interviewed Justin Vivian Bond, and of course,
I love Justin Vivian Bond.
Of course, is not a drag queen.
I knew from Kiki and her days, you know.
But at one point, did a character that was in drag when they were doing the Foxy party at the Cock. Yes, at the Cock.
At the Cock.
And they were talking about, you know, this party, and then there was another party that they did with Mario, called, I think it was called Cream. It was something like, it's in the book.
It was Cream.
It was Cream.
Yeah, it was Cream. That was the name of that party.
About,
yeah,
you know,
I only went to that
about,
one time.
The different events that they did there that were really quirky and unusual, shall we say. I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about.
Quirky and unusual.
Say whatever. Yeah.
And then, you know, talking about that, and then talking about these as well, am I allowed to like speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
one of
them was like a biggest load contest, right? And
yes.
Framing this as an act of activism to sort of like destigmatize sex in the queer community, and having a person who is identifying themselves as a drag artist, like being the person who was in charge of that, is just part of this long-standing relationship that drag has with activism. And I love all the different forms that can take. And so that was another one that was one of my favorite things. Absolutely.
Because to me, I think it would be fascinating, like an older drag queen, say Lipsinka, Ruby Rim, how they got started and why. Because there was society, didn't even exist.
Yes.
Like there really wasn't even a drag community in those days.
Right.
How driven you would have to be, and how much inner authenticity you would have to have that desire and that need to actually dress up as the opposite sex.
Yes. I loved talking to Ruby for this book.
I can imagine
Ruby's story. I tell this story sometimes when I do the Glitter and Concrete show, because Ruby has come to see it a couple of times. And when I interviewed Ruby, I was at my parents' house. And I was, you know, I had closed the door to my room and I did the interview and everything like that. And I came out of the room and my dad said, "Oh, how did the interview go?" And I said, "Oh, ha, ha, ha. It was really funny. She told this really funny story about like getting her start on stage after a fisting show. Ha, 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 ha."
You have really cool parents.
And And I was like, and she was like slipping in all the Crisco. It was so funny. And then my dad,
she broke a heel.
And then my dad says to me, Liz, what is a fisting show and what does Crisco have to do with it?
Oh.
Then I had to tell him.
Right.
You know, you bring it up, you got to explain
and
it.
I was just like, because in my head, I was like, oh, of course he knows what that is. Like,
yeah.
things,
right.
Whatever.
He would know what fisting is.
And to his credit, I told him, and he went, oh.
That's great.
I love your parents.
But you know what? You have a way of explaining it. It's the way you speak. It's almost scientific in nature. When you talk about fisting or Crisco or any of those things, it is kind of like, it does not sound the same as
coming out of her
right. Thank you.
Pretty frame and
yeah, right. Exactly. It's just, and it's not at all shocking either.
Right. Because so matter of factly.
Right. I ended up telling that story at the Center for Brooklyn History.
Oh, you're kidding. That's great. That's really.
And I was just like, you know what? If you're going to have me at your historical institution,
right.
I'm going to talk about fisting on this stage.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's a historical act.
Yes, it
Thank
is.
you very much. It absolutely is.
Absolutely. Because I'm just wondering, because again, psychologically, I'm trying to figure out how that started. How did they cross over into that? And I think because at least for me, when I was coming out, I had like a lot of self-loathing. We didn't have centers. We didn't have mentors. We didn't have anybody to teach us.
Yeah.
We just kind of had to go with our instinct and try to find our way and our desires and all of this. And I know for myself, I always liked straight men. I liked that macho straight man thing. I had self-loathing. I did not want to be gay. I almost didn't want to be associated with gay. But I like the straight men. So, and the straight men like women. So I was wondering if that might be part of the psychology.
Oh, that's interesting.
At that time was to try to attract or to lure, be attractive to men, like for straight men. Because like when I walked into the gay bar, the drag queen who was dressed like a woman was the last person in that room I would want to sleep with. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think that was absolutely the case for Ruby also.
Really?
Especially she started in the 70s, and she started performing at the Anvil,
right?
Which was this gay male sex club, and it was
hardcore. It was a hardcore gay male
where they fist each other.
Right.
On stage.
Right. That is exactly really there you go.
So go ahead.
It was very much this time of the clone look, right?
Like, right. We called them clones. That's what we called them, was clones.
Like the fresh out of a Tom of Finland drawing.
Right. We called them clones. Yeah.
And so there was this like very intense lean into masculinity. And that often led to a complete rejection of drag. And Ruby had to really win these people over, and they threw her on the stage the first time she performed as a goof at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I think it was.
Right.
Then they loved her and she kept coming back. And so I don't want to say like that's the crossover moment, but I think it's probably one of many at that time where there had to be a person who just like, in the for lack of a better phrase, took the piss out of whatever
literally over there, right.
So,
but Ruby was very different from Lip Synca. I mean, and you know this, you both know this. A lot of what's been written about Lip Synca, and if you've ever seen the performance that Lip Synca does and the movements and the precision with them, it is, to me, it's one of the higher art forms of drag. It's very different than other forms of drag, which are also art.
Right.
But
she has a definite specific craft.
It is really incredible to watch every movement. It's like watching a wax figure come to life on stage. I don't know how Lip Synca did what she did, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Well, I think what's interesting
And
about that
gorgeous.
is that for a long time, lip syncing was looked down on within the
Mhm.
Right.
drag community, because if you were a person who was a female impersonator, which meant that you were a person who performed drag as your profession, and people were very quick to establish and lean into that hierarchy, the people who were being paid to do that. When lip syncing was able to start to happen because of the changes in technology that allowed, music to be played in that way in a venue, drag artists prior to that had to have an act. They had to sing live. They had to have a comedy.
Right.
They had to do burlesque style striptease.
Right.
They had to do something. And all of a sudden it democratized this form, and a lot of people took issue with that. But then you have someone like Lipsynca who is leaning into this this way of doing drag that for a very long time had been demeaned, and is showing that it's not something that has to be looked down on. Not that it ever was, but sometimes people need an example to show.
Right. And her performance, the class, the iconic way she interpreted a female, it just to this day fascinates me. And I haven't seen one person that's come along that I actually met a new younger drag queen that is similar, but I've never seen anybody do it like Lipsynca.
Yeah,
she shows what's possible. I do see performers performing with that level of intricacy now.
Right, it's a level of intricacy. That is exactly right.
But I wouldn't say that it was always a thing.
Yeah.
Now we cannot talk about drag and pop culture in America without mentioning Divine.
Yeah.
I love
and she came in as a force with John Waters and made no apologies, and what she was one that really in my lifetime really shifted the whole drag community in a way.
For you, Tim, was it her completely outrageous? Divine would do anything. Was it that? What was it about Divine for you?
Just outrageous. You could not take your eyes off of her. Right. You didn't know what the hell she was going to do next, or what. And just the fact that she always played the mother. She played a woman in the movies. They never explained it, never mentioned it, she was just the woman. And that I had never seen before. I had never seen that before.
Yeah.
But she really did make an impact in film, especially. I don't remember any other drag performers prior to her in that industry.
But a lot of it, as you know, and you know this too, it was John Waters who
absolutely
really crafted Divine's career. And there's been a lot of negativity said about John Waters and his influence on Divine, and how he pushed Divine past the brink when Divine didn't want to do certain things, but for John to please John would. It's been very controversial. I know what you love so much about Divine, Tim. You're from the Midwest. To me, that was a caricature of like the trailer trash mother.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what Divine played. That's exactly. And it was like, oh my God. All right. I come from the Bronx. I knew the O'Reillys down the street. They had a mother like that. All of us knew a mom that was like that. And Divine was the first one to come along and really.
But yeah, Elyssa, I would like to get your opinion on Divine and John Waters. And
oh, sure. Well, what I think is interesting in some of the things that you're talking about is that, you said you had never seen anything like this before, but you wouldn't have because of the Hays Code. And the Hays Code ended in 1968.
What is the Hays Code?
What's the Hays Code?
Oh, sure. So the Hays Code was I guess like maybe you would call it like a code of ethics for cinema that was started in 1933 or 1934 and then went until 1968. And one of the governing principles of it was that there could not be any overt suggestion or depiction of homosexuality on screen. And so you would never have had a gay man playing a drag queen, an openly gay man, I should say, playing drag queen on the screen. You would have it, and we talked about this earlier, you would have it in terms of Milton Berle.
Right, or Flip Wilson,
Wilson
right.
in the 70s. You would have it, you know, in comedic, high comedic drag, we'll call it. But you would never have someone like Divine. Absolutely not.
No, it would have been too over the top. The other people are what you call digestible. Divine was not digestible.
Certainly for mainstream straight audiences who were the, you know, the gold standard for a long time.
Interesting. I got a question for you. It's not a drag question, but
it's okay. You can ask it.
It is gay history. Have you ever heard of Billy Haynes?
Oh, of course.
Of course,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because Billy
Wisecracker
Haynes,
is a great book.
Billy Haynes basically got erased from the entertainment annals. He was at one point the highest paid actor in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like he was up there. He surpassed, what was his name? Casanova.
Rudolph Valentino.
Rudy Valentino. He even surpassed him, his pay grade. He was, and he was openly gay. That it was, everybody knew he was gay.
Yeah.
And I think it was Goldwyn or Mayer, one of those two, had told him. I mean, he was quick too, and best friends with Joan Crawford.
Wow.
And had went in to. They had called him in one time, and they said, "Okay, you're going to this." And he had a partner, I think, if I remember correctly, a life partner, and he said, "Okay, we've got this big gala, this big event that's coming up for the studio. I do not want you to take your husband, or I want you to divorce him and take."
Yeah, you have to take a woman with you, an arm piece.
And Billy, without missing a beat, says, "I would be happy to. I will do that if you don't take your wife." They said, "We will erase you from entertainment," and they did, because he refused that.
Yeah.
He refused to go to this event. Basically, I mean, there were other things, but I think that was kind of the pinnacle of what finally broke the camel's back.
But I think what's interesting about Billy Haynes is that the way he reinvented himself as this arbiter of design,
right?
In post-war America,
that had a lot to do with it.
Reclaimed a space of stardom for himself in a different
right. He became was it interior designer, I think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Interior design.
Yeah. And interior design, Joan Crawford's house, and she told her friends, and he became, one of the biggest ones in Hollywood again. But just the fact that he was openly gay, he was successful, and they literally, you cannot find a Billy Haynes movie anywhere now.
They really did succeed in erasing Billy Haynes. Yes. I didn't realize he was more famous than Valentino, but now after hearing the complete story, now this makes sense. They just erased him.
Yeah, so I think we should really do like a friend of mine did a play about him. That's how I was familiarized with him. But I think we should do a film about him, a movie about this movie star.
There you go. So far, we've come up today. We're with a play that you're going to star in. We're going to do a movie about this movie star. We got all kinds of things going on here today.
All kinds of creativity.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? So I am. What am I doing? I am going to be at LavenderCon in Washington, D.C., which is a queer book festival at the National Press Club.
How cool.
The CNN episode aired this past Sunday, but it'll be streaming on HBO Max on July 9th. And then I am giving talks and lectures, and we're doing another Glitter and Concrete show in November. So I will be around.
So it means a lot to us so that we can follow you and show up at things. How do we and our audience who's watching?
How can people find you?
So we're kept in the loop with what you're doing.
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Miss Manhattan NY.
Okay.
And also on X at that same address, Miss Manhattan NY. And then my newsletter is miss-manhattan.com.
Right.
And if we sign up for the newsletter, we'll definitely be kept abreast of all of this,
Yes,
right?
You will.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
And I will
I'm
also
going for the
be-
newsletter.
I'll be at DragCon as well. We're going to be selling my
Oh,
book at DragCon.
sweet. Okay,
Yes.
well, I'll probably see you there because
Okay.
I
Oh,
usually don't cover that. I usually cover it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I will be there.
That is so great. We
can't
had a couple of comments.
I can't wait to see you in person and give you a hug, a proper hug.
Yes, I would love that.
She is very eminently huggable. You are.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, we've unfortunately we have had a problem with the Facebook live feed, which is our normal, our main and immediate viewership. Later, as it's archived and there's more, but I had forgotten to click a button that I was supposed to click until while we were talking and coming on the air, I clicked it. So we only had a couple viewers. We had Sue's GK Designs, who's a good friend of ours.
And Sue's amazing. She can't wait to read this book. She's up in the Boston area. Thanks for this show. And she's an amazing costume designer, but her costumes are incredible. And she has a real appreciation, of course, for drag. She's
and Danielle.
Thank you.
And Danielle says, hello, hi.
Hello.
He says, I am Muslim and I support you.
Oh,
thank you, Danielle. Oh my!
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, unfortunately, we only had a couple people that commented today because normally it's a whole list. But
yeah, but we will get the show out. It'll be on
and more people will be seeing it. Most definitely. Oh my God, Elyssa Maxx Goodman.
So much. Okay, one more time. Glitter and concrete. Here we go.
And one other question.
Goodman.
One other question I had for you. Now you had mentioned Tu Wong Fu.
Yes.
The Tu Wong Fu. We're kind of going all full circle, coming back to that.
Back to Tu Wong Fu.
Did you see the original Priscilla, which I'm sure you have?
I did.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, of course you did.
But Tu Wong Fu, they adapted it more to the American society, I think. Yeah. So that's why I think it worked a little better.
That was my friend Sweetie's big break, was that movie.
In Tu Wong Fu.
Mm-hmm. And that's why when you said that was your icebreaker, so to speak. I love that. I love that connection.
Yes. Well, again, everybody follow Elyssa Maxx Goodman for everything you need to know about her. This has been so delightful. I'm so grateful.
Delightful. Right. And perfect for Pride, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect for Pride. Absolutely. Now you all got to know a little bit more about the history of drag through Elyssa Maxx Goodman's eyes. Get the book. There's also historical pictures in the book. And she's a fabulous writer.
Thank you so much, both of you, for having me.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you,
nice
everybody.
Tim. Thank you, Wendy.
You're
absolutely.
So welcome.
Thank you, Elyssa.
Of course.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.